First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming here this evening. I know evenings are precious, so I hope it'll be as informative as possible and that you'll all learn something that you can take away to have a positive impact on your lives and your health. So I've entitled this, You Cannot Outrun a Bad Diet, and as we go through the presentation, you'll maybe understand why I thought that was a suitable title for the talk. Emma Dunn is my name. I'll introduce myself in a bit more detail shortly. And I'm a certified banting coach, and that sounds like a strange word, banting, but what the word banting means is that I'm qualified to coach people in a low carbohydrate lifestyle. And again, I'll talk more about that, but just so that you're kind of not scratching your head. So the agenda for this evening, the first is we're going to just review the dietary and health trends across the globe over the last 40 years or so. We're going to talk about what is causing our obesity epidemic, and everyone has their opinion on this, but we're maybe going to look at some data. And then I'm going to talk about my own personal story. And then I'll talk in detail about what banting is, why would you do it, and how can it be done. So first I'll just introduce myself. I know some of you pretty well and others I don't know at all. My background is in engineering. I have worked for over 20 years in the high-tech sector, both as an engineer and also as an engineering manager. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, but I am a certified banting coach. And my background in engineering means that data is critically important for decision making in my experience. When I got into trying to understand nutrition a little bit more, it was the data that really interested me and led me to go down this road. I've also been blogging about my own eating and cooking experiences since last January, so that blog is there if anyone is interested in having a look at it. So I'm now affiliated with this group. These two guys have set up a collaboration called Real Meal Revolution. And the goal of this collaboration is to support the dietary changes that will reverse the obesity epidemic in the world, and also reverse the trend in the severe growth in type 2 diabetes. So who are these two guys? So the guy on the left there, the older guy, is Professor Noakes. He's a professor of exercise and sports science from the University of Cape Town. And he is one of the top-rated nutritional researchers in the world. He has written more than 750 books and articles, and one of them is a very famous running book called The Lore of Running. I don't know anyone who runs may be familiar with it. He himself has run over 70 marathons and ultramarathons in his career, and he was also one of the inventors of the goo that's used by marathon runners, you know, that syrupy stuff that people take to stop them hitting the wall. And a number of years ago, like 5 or 6 years ago, despite that very, very long career in both running and also in his nutrition research, he was amazed that he was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, and he could not believe how that could be the case. He had followed an ultra low-fat diet during his entire running career, and this didn't make any sense to him. So he went back to the drawing board and pulled out a lot of the research that had been done over the last 40 years, and then the penny dropped and he realised, well, the low-fat diet was key to the reason he was type 2 diabetic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. The other guy there is John O'Proudfoot, and he's a food writer and entrepreneur in South Africa. And as I said, they're in collaboration to try and change the trend in obesity in the world by getting people like me trained to train other people on how to change their diet for the better. So again, just as I said, just talking about data. So this is a graph here showing the trend in overweight projections worldwide, and you can see there a very, very significant increase from around 40% to over 70% overweight by 2020. And the USA is that blue line there, and the UK is the black line, and Ireland is something similar. In 2012, Ireland's cost of obesity was estimated to be €1.6 billion per annum. And that was due to healthcare costs and also lack of productivity costs, and that comes from EU Safe Food. The other point to note is that people are gaining weight at a much faster rate than ever before, and worldwide obesity has doubled since 1980. And this graph shows also the trend in type 2 diabetes, and you can see it's very similar to the previous graph on overweight, except that in the last 15 years it actually has taken a hockey stick turn up to the right, showing that the growth in type 2 diabetes is even faster than the growth in overweight and obesity. So that's a very, very worrying trend. Again, there are figures from the US up to 2014, but UK and Ireland very, very similar. Just a point to make about type 2 diabetes. It seems like something that somebody else suffers from, but it's a very real risk for people eating a standard modern diet at the moment. One of the consequences of diabetes can be loss of sight. Another consequence can be kidney failure, limb amputation, heart failure, and failure of wounds to heal. And I suppose I'm close to that at the moment, in that I know a family member who's close to me who is suffering from this and has actually experienced almost all those. So there's a term out there called metabolic syndrome, and that's a term used to describe a group of measures that put you at a very, very high risk of developing some or all of these diseases. So heart disease, problems with your cholesterol, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, dementia. So some researchers are now calling Alzheimer's and dementia type 3 diabetes, cancer, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which would have always maybe historically been associated with people who drink too much alcohol, but not anymore. So the metabolic syndrome at the moment is accounting for 75% of worldwide healthcare costs. So what is metabolic syndrome? So metabolic syndrome is a combination of 3 or more of these 5 risk factors. So the first easiest one to understand is waist measurement. So waist measurement of more than 38 inches for a man or 35 inches for a woman. Elevated blood pressure, so if you've got high blood pressure greater than 135/85. If you've got high fasting blood sugar of more than 5.6 millimoles per litre. And then there's 2 other measures there, which are cholesterol breakdown measures. So if you've got low good cholesterol, which is low HDL, or high blood triglycerides, again, that's another measure of blood, fat in the blood, if they're higher than a certain value. If you have 3 or more of them, you're classified as having metabolic syndrome. And as I said, they put you at a much greater risk of having all these very serious set of diseases. So at the moment, how many, if anyone was to guess, if you looked at the American population, how many would you say have metabolic syndrome? If you give a guess at a percentage.
Is that the actual or the dead? No.
Just
the actual.
The actual.
70%.
So the estimate at the moment is 50% who would qualify in the waist measurement piece, right? So having all the three of these, including the waist measurement. The bad news is for the people who are thin and for people who think they're getting away with it, 40% of the lean are also metabolic syndrome. They also have poor cholesterol scores or potentially elevated blood pressure, and they're also at the same risk of developing these diseases. Those people are called, the acronym is TOFFIes, thin on the outside but fat on the inside. So what's the cause? Are we eating too much? This is kind of the standard model of obesity. So you either eat too much or exercise too little. So what does that, how does that sound? Do people think that makes sense? If you take an individual at 20 years of age and they're at their ideal weight, they only have to eat an excess of 20 calories a day to be obese by the time they're 40. So they either have to eat 20 calories a day or exercise too little by 20 calories a day to be obese by 40. That's if this model is correct. This model, I suppose the other point that this model says is that it's the behaviour of the individual that drives the weight gain, and it's the individual's fault that it happened. So just maybe take a little bit of time to think about, why do we have so many overweight runners? There's 3 major macronutrients: carbohydrates, which are comprised of sugar and starch, protein and fats. So what do they look like? So, carbohydrates, sugar, bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, corn, maybe bananas might fit into that one as well. Then you've got protein, so your meats, your fish, your eggs fit into that category, and nuts. And then you've got your fats. So there's a few different types of fat. There's saturated fat like butter or coconut oil, and they typically are hard at room temperature. You've got olive oil, and you've got the avocado there. You'd also have lard. These would be all considered natural fats. A comment to make about these are that proteins and fats are essential. Natural fats are essential for the absorption of a particular group of vitamins, A, D, E and K. They're fat soluble, which means you can only actually absorb them if you are eating fat. Proteins and fats are essential to your body's existence and repair of damaged cells. Carbohydrates are completely non-essential. So again, just come back to the data. So trends in sugar consumption since the 1970s. So around 1972, would have been the US, they would have been consuming around about sort of the 85 grams per day of sugar per person. And that has skyrocketed up to about 125 grams per day. And you can see the corresponding trend. That green line there is the BMI. Sorry, I should be using my pointer. So BMI trend has followed, and then the diabetes trend has followed as well. And then let's look at the other macronutrients. So as we see, sugar, which falls into the group of carbohydrate, has increased over the last 30 years. Fat has actually decreased. So since the introduction of the food pyramid in 1977, which said eat a low-fat diet, people followed the guidance and they dropped the amount of fat that they were eating. Protein has more or less stayed the same. The trend in obesity and overweight has gone up since the 60s. So let's look at another potential reason for obesity and overweight. So there's a hormone called insulin, and insulin is generated by the pancreas. When you eat something with carbohydrate in it, the sugar in your blood goes up. That is actually toxic to your body, and your body needs to get the sugar out of the blood as quickly as possible. So the insulin is produced by the pancreas to pick the blood up from the sugar, and then it brings it to your cells to be stored as energy, either as glycogen or as fat. However, the cells over time can become resistant to the insulin. And when this happens, the pancreas needs to produce even more insulin to bring the sugar levels down. It's kind of like, say, the first time you have a pint of beer. The first time in your whole life you have a pint of beer, after 2 or 3 mouthfuls, it completely knocks you out. Maybe a year later, you might need half a pint of beer before it knocks you out. And in 10 years' time, as you get used to drinking beer, it might take 6 or 7 pints before it knocks you out. So it's the same analogy with insulin. So your body needs more and more insulin as you get older to cope with the blood sugar and bring it down. This is called the development of insulin resistance, and it can take quite a while to establish. It can take maybe 20, 30 years for us to establish. But as the cells become more resistant to insulin, then the pancreas can't keep up, and basically the cells are too damaged and you have got type 2 diabetes. The main driver for insulin production is sugar and starch. So the more sugar and starch you take in, the more insulin your body has to produce to cope with it. It is the excess production of the hormone insulin that makes you fat and keeps you fat. If you remember when I said when the insulin is produced, the body has to decide either to store it as glycogen for your muscles to use or store it as fat. The enemy has never been dietary fat. It is the hormone insulin in excess that is the #1 predictor of heart disease. Sugar and starch, i.e. carbohydrates, are the major factor for stimulation of insulin, and they are also the major stimulant of appetite. Sugar and starch confuse what's known as the apostat, which is the trigger in your brain that tells you when to eat. So the more carbohydrate you eat, the more frequently you need to eat, and the bigger quantity of carbohydrate your body looks to eat. So it's like a vicious circle. Just have a picture there of some food. So the first one there is a jacket potato. You think that's quite a healthy thing to eat. The middle one there is 150 grams of rice. Again, you think that's a healthy thing to eat. And this one here is 32 grams of cornflakes. In actual fact, eating them, the impact from your blood sugar perspective is this exactly the same as eating 9 teaspoons of sugar. So let's look at the food pyramid. So this is the US food pyramid. It was introduced in 1977 by Senator McGovern. At the time it was introduced, there were no studies to prove that this was a good way for people to eat. There was no data from any studies to say that this was the right way to eat for optimum health. There was a big worry at the time that middle-aged men in particular were dropping dead of heart attacks, and the worry was that saturated fat in particular was the cause. In actual fact, it's now widely it's recognised that it was actually smoking was the issue at the time, because there was a huge prevalence of smoking in the 60s and 70s. The food pyramid advised to eat between 6 and 11 servings of carbohydrate or starch per day as an adult, but this was driven also by commercial forces to drive the US farming of wheat, corn and soy on the basis of this unproven diet heart hypothesis. And it was also to make food cheap. And the rest of the world followed. So this one is the UK one. Food pyramid, all exactly the same. And this one here is the Japanese one. It's exactly the same, except it's upside down. The food pyramid, as it stands right there, has fueled the waistline expansion and metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes because it basically tells you to cut back on your fat and eat loads of heart-healthy carbohydrates. It's worth just spending a bit of time thinking about this study that was done in the 1990s. So it was called the Women's Health Initiative. And this was taken on amongst the women who worked in Boeing over a 10-year period. So there was 50,000 women in the study. They were divided into 2 groups. And the first group, first 25,000 were put on an ultra-low fat diet. So they had to reduce their fat intake from 37% down to something like 26%. And the rest of the group were told to just continue to eat whatever way you're eating. Just go ahead and do it. 10 years, the study continued. And after a decade, the women that reduced their fat from 37% down to 26% saw no difference in cancer or heart disease or any significant heart or health outcome or any all-cause mortality. They also only experienced a difference of 1 pound weight loss in the full 10 years compared to the control group who ate whatever they want. In 2013, Harvard Medical Review came out with a statement that said the low-fat approach may have worked for the occasional individual, but as a nation it has not helped us to control weight or become healthier. So now we're getting some media coverage of the latest, so some of the latest available medical studies. So Time magazine had this cover in 2014 saying, "Eat butter. The scientists were wrong after all." And this recent one, New Scientist, "Fat or carbs, which is really worse for your health?" So we're shifting right back 40 years and saying what really is good for us and what really is bad for us. The fact that fat, natural fats, is good for your health is backed by some of the leading obesity and nutritionists in the world, and also some of the leading medical doctors and heart surgeons in the UK at the moment. It's not, I suppose there's quite a bit of controversy at the moment, so some group of doctors and nutritionists would say it's bad and others would say it's good. But I would say let's use the data to come up with the correct conclusion rather than just opinion. So I'll just talk about my story. Here is me 10 years ago. I was 3 stone heavier than I am now. I was an obsessive exerciser. As I grew up, I probably struggled with my weight a bit as a teenager. And then in my 20s, I took up running to try and manage that. So when I got that photograph taken, it was 3 weeks after running the Dublin City Marathon. I was running 5 times a week. One of those would have been a long run of probably 16, 17, 18 miles. So what was life like at the time? So I was always hungry. I followed an ultra low fat diet. I was scraping the butter off of food. I was eating only very lean meats. I wasn't eating cheese. I was eating low fat milk. But I was overweight despite the vigorous exercise, and that included the marathon running. I was always hungry and I was always eating. So I'd eat food. I might have pasta and vegetables, and then 2 hours later I'd be hungry again. I'd be eating more. So the carbohydrate was fueling my appetite and was forcing me to eat more and more. I also suffered quite badly with what my GP diagnosed as IBS. So I would go some days quite debilitating pains, and then other days I'd be fine for no obvious reason. But I had that for years, and I kind of grew to just get used to it and put up with it. And then in 2013, I attended a talk by a work colleague of mine. Some of you might be familiar with Ivor Cummins. He's the Fat Emperor. He did a talk similar to this on the detrimental impact of sugar on your diet and the fact that fat is good. And to be honest, I was a little bit taken aback. I was really convinced that the low-fat diet was obviously the best way to live your life by. But he presented a lot of data, like I just showed you there, and I found it quite compelling. So I went off and I discussed it with my husband, and I said, you know, Ivor has said that this high-fat diet is much better for your health. So we spent about 3 or 4 weeks reading articles and watching some videos, and we decided, well, there seems to be something in it. We'll give it a try. And to be honest, we said we'd try it for 1 month, and really I was very skeptical. I didn't think that I was going to really get anything from it. But at the end of the 4 weeks, I knew there was no way I was going back to the old way of eating. So it gave me a complete freedom from food obsession and from hunger, complete, total and utter appetite control. No calorie counting. The weight just fell off. There was no effort required. There's none of this excessive exercise required. And the best thing of all is that the IBS just vanished. It's completely gone. And when I think back of how bad I used to feel and how good I feel now, there's just no comparison. You couldn't get me to go back to eat that way for a million euro. So other things are better, so you have more energy. Sleep is better. Joint pain is better. So I have a very bad bunion on one foot that has always given me pain since I was a child. It is significantly better, and the reason for that is because there's less inflammation in my body compared to what I had there from the food. Sorry, before I go on to that. So my own experience has made me really understand and internalize some of the myths that are there about diet. So the first thing is that fat makes you fat. Natural healthy fats from natural sources do not make you fat. You have to eat natural fat to be thin. The second is that all calories are equal, and that it's just a matter of eating 2,000 calories a day. That is absolutely not the case. To be a healthy weight, it's about eating the right calories and making the right food choices, and not about counting calories. The third is about exercise, and I'm a huge fan of exercise. And there's many benefits like muscle tone and mood and sleep, but weight loss is not one of them, and this is case in point. Huge exercise there, a 3 stone heavier than this one. Weight loss did not come from the exercise. The weight loss is a tool to make you feel better, but the weight loss and optimum weight comes from the food that you eat. And the last one is that it's exceptionally difficult, not for all people, but for many people, to maintain a healthy weight, especially as they get older and into middle age, when they follow a low-fat diet. So it's estimated that about 80% of humans are what's called carbohydrate intolerant, and they develop this insulin resistance as they get older. So as they get into their 30s and 40s, they develop the belly, which is called the insulin roll. So, you know, this around the tummy and the back, that's all comes from the insulin. It's the deposition of the fat from excess production of insulin. So the word banting, well, banting is essentially a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, and it comes from this man here. He was an undertaker who lived in the 19th century, and he was grossly overweight, and he went to his doctor and said, I need to lose weight. And the doctor put him on a low sugar starch diet, so meat, eggs, fat. And he basically documented his progress, and he wrote essentially the very first diet book. And it led to a dramatic weight loss, and that was the first diet book that was ever published. So that's where the word banting comes from. It's called after him. And what it is about eating real food, so natural food that does not come from a packet. It is low in starch, low in sugar, and it improves your health in every respect. And it's about eating real food, not from a packet, and about eating the way our ancestors ate. So if you look back at the Native Americans back, say, 200 years ago, they ate almost entirely buffalo. They ate everything, the whole thing. And they were extremely healthy. Almost 100% of Native Americans that live in America now are type 2 diabetic. They have really struggled with the high carbohydrate diet because they haven't evolved with any kind of starch in their diet. So the golden rules of banting. The first is it's real food only, so natural food, so like eggs and meat, fish, cheese, dairy, no low fat. So when a product is made low fat, they take the fat out and they load it back in with sugar so it doesn't taste disgusting. No sugar, no added sugar, no grains, and natural fats are your friends. The thing I'll say here now is that this is not a diet, and it's actually a lifestyle, and it's a plan to eat this way for life. If you want to lose weight and do this for a short period of time, this is not the thing to do, because the minute you go off it, you just pile the weight back on again and all the health consequences that go with it. For people who are carb intolerant, which is 80% of the population, to really do the best for your bodies, this is the diet, and if you try it, it will forever change the nature of the food that you eat. And if you really believe that you can do something for your health, it's much, much easier than you would expect. So following the banting lifestyle is very easy. There's lists. Now, I've only just given a very small sample. There's a green list, an orange list, and a red list. So the green list, you can eat anything you like off that, as much as you want. You don't count it or weigh it, you just eat what you want from that. So in that is like any kind of animal protein, fish, dairy, eggs, natural fats. So what is not included in that are trans fats, which are used in a lot of processed food, and also seed oils like sunflower oil, because they're extremely heavily processed and cause inflammation in the body, when especially their application is used, their application is a lot of the oils are heated to fry food, and that causes oxidation and is very damaging. A lot of raw nuts and seeds and berries and vegetables, so loads of vegetables so long as they're above the ground, non-starchy, you know, tons of them. Orange list, then you can eat some of this, but you know, just keep it in moderation, maybe not every day, maybe not everything from the list every day. So some fruits, nuts and some vegetables, like a sweet potato maybe might fall in that list. And then on the red list there's stuff that you want to avoid, so sugar, fizzy drinks, juices and smoothies. So juices and smoothies, when they are ingested, just are pure sugar and they cause that massive insulin spike and the fat storage. Grains, fast foods and processed foods, again full of the bad fats, full of sugar, highly addictive. A lot of the processed foods that, you know, come from the supermarket, the food industry has finely balanced the ratio between fat, sugar and salt to make you really want more and more and more of it. So the more you eat, the more you crave, and the more you eat, the more insulin you produce and the more fat you lay down. So what does it actually look like in reality? So I just took a photograph of my shopping, and people might be concerned that it's an expensive way to eat, but I do most of my shopping in Aldi and it's no more expensive than it used to be. But you can see there, it's all natural food, lots of eggs, lots of fish, you know, chicken, cheese, loads of vegetables, loads of raw nuts, but really, really tasty. And obviously, the real worry I had when I switched was, well, is this going to kill me? Am I going to drop dead from my cholesterol being through the roof? And this graph here talks to a study done by this guy called Jeff Volek. He's one of the leading researchers in the field. And he took a group of, I think it was 50, or I'm not sure how many exactly, people with metabolic syndrome, and he split them in two groups for 12 weeks. And he put one group on a very low carb diet and the other one on a very low fat diet. And he measured, these measures here are markers of health. When you get your blood taken at the doctors, they'll do cholesterol tests, but the cholesterol test will have the breakdown of these measures. So what you want is you want your fasting blood sugar to be as low as possible. And here it shows that the low carbohydrate diet, which is the high fat diet, gives you the greatest improvement or reduction in blood sugar fasting after 12 weeks compared to the low fat diet. The next one is insulin. Again, you want your insulin to be low. So the change in insulin production, it improved by 50% among the population compared to only 20% here. The blood pressure, and this is one of the most immediate changes for somebody with metabolic syndrome who goes on this diet. Within several days, their blood pressure will normalize. So you will see an improvement, a massive improvement there of about 25% in resting blood pressure. And actually on the low fat diet, it went up, which is bad. Triglycerides, which is a measure of the fat in the blood. Again, the low carbohydrate diet trumped, was more than twice as good as the low fat diet. And then this one is HDL, which is high density lipoprotein, also known as good cholesterol. That has gone up, and this one is protective. This is protective of heart health, so that's good. So is this going to kill me? Well, there's the data from that population. I also have had my own bloods done. I've had them done 3 times, and I have seen a massive improvement in all of these by switching the diet. My triglycerides, which is one of the key measures of heart health and risk of heart attack, my doctor actually told me that the levels he's seen, he almost never sees them, that they're almost prehistoric levels. But the only reason for that is the diet. If I had had that test done when I was doing the marathon, that 3 stone heavier, I'd say I was on my way to metabolic syndrome. So coming back to banting, and as I said, I've just recently qualified as a certified banting coach. If you're considering maybe thinking about this, it takes a while to digest. As I said, when I heard about this first, it took several weeks. I went off and read more stuff and watched videos. If you were somebody who feels that their health would improve by this, coaching can potentially help you even more. I mean, I did it without coaching, but I completely immerse myself in it. I immerse myself in the reading and the videos, and you have to keep telling yourself that this is the right thing to do, because the guidance from all the health boards is the food pyramid. Now that will change, and it's starting to get some momentum, but you know, it could be 5-10 years out. I mean, are you prepared to wait that long? So can coaching help you? So through Real Meal Revolution, I'm going to be running a group, probably starting around the end of August, and it'll be kind of similar in idea to Weight Watchers, but it will be a smaller group where you'll come together for an hour a week, and you learn how to do this. So there will be probably a 6-week learning process in how you actually do this, and you know, the first week or two can be quite hard because you'll suffer from carbohydrate withdrawal. But the coaching will help you, because you'll get the advice from myself. You'll also get support from the people in the group, which will help to motivate you. There's a forum that I will set up through Facebook, a private group where you'll be able to post questions and talk to each other. There's also an absolutely fantastic set of resources on the Real Meal Revolution website, which is if you decided to go for coaching, that is how you subscribe to it. There's hundreds of recipes using real food. There's meal tracking assistance, and maybe let me just show you what that looks like. This is an example of something that a couple of meals that I ate on a particular day. I just entered them in to see what it would look like. So all you do is you type in what you ate, and it gives you the breakdown of fat, protein and carbohydrate. And you can see then for each food item as well what the carbohydrate level is, the fat level is, and the protein level is. So you can see item by item, you know, if you're exceeding your carbs, where exactly that's happening. The other point of this, the power of a tracker, is what gets measured gets done. If you write down what you're eating and you're trying to achieve something, having that record there is a very serious motivator. So as I said, you've got a meal tracking assistance. There's weekly meal plans, so if you don't know what to eat, the plans are there for the week. And there's also the possibility to completely generate your shopping list from what you choose to eat. So that will happen automatically. So if you just pick what you want to eat, it'll just go into the shopping list. The other thing about the coaching is part of the meeting, the weekly meeting, is that, you know, a certain period of time, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, will be spent talking about a particular aspect of the diet, and you know, growing your knowledge and understanding of it will help greatly in your success. You'll have hands-on support from the banters in your group, and also the online support, so the ability to ask questions, you know, you don't have to wait to the meeting to get an answer to your question. So that's it. That's the link to me on the Real Meal Revolution website. As I said, the first meeting is going to start on the 24th of August. It's a Wednesday, and it'll be a weekly meeting. It'll be face to face. The idea of this is coaching to learn how to do it, and it's not like it's not that you join the group forever. You join it, you learn how to do it, and then you're done. So you get your success, you know how to do it, and you don't need this continuous education. It's not like Weight Watchers, where 6 months later you've fallen off the wagon and you have to come back. The beauty of this is that your appetite is completely controlled. You're not counting calories. So long as you eat the food from the right list, it works. So as I said, this one here is the face-to-face one, and then at some point, it might be September, October timeframe, there will be a virtual group set up. The platform for doing that is still in development, but I know for some people the actual physical effort of going to a meeting, it might be better to be able to do it remotely because the location or the time may not be suitable. And I also put together this reading list for people that I can send out later if you're interested, if you would like to educate yourselves more on the facts. This is one of them. This is one of the better books. This is the full history of nutrition kind of since the 1960s, how it evolved, and some of the political and economic drivers behind it. It's Nina Teicholz, and it's actually a very easy read. It's not too heavy. I just put together this list of, these are a list of doctors and nutritionists and heart surgeons who were at a conference about a year ago talking about this for days on end and how we can reverse the dietary guidance that's out there. And that's all I have.